Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Liminal One Project. I'm joined today with Paul Fisher. Paul Fisher and I met probably 6 months ago at a networking event. Since then, Paul and I have stayed in contact, and throughout that contact, I learned of Paul's background and really his passion as it relates to health and fitness. He had a really interesting story to talk about, and so I wanted to spend some time with him today, focused on really talking about the change that you went through to land where you are today. So let's all welcome Paul Fisher here to the Liminal One Project. Thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Clinton. It's exciting to be here, especially because when we first met, this was a concept, your podcast. So it's awesome to see it come to life, and I'm really honored to be here. It's great.
Yeah, thanks for coming. You know, you're right. It was a concept when we first met. And now it's come to life. It's been a challenge, but the challenge has been great. The change has been great. And that's really why I wanted to bring you in as well, because I think one reason we connected was on this idea of change. You know, one thing that I learned about you is that you were not always sort of into fitness, into like the full-blown health awareness. But that kind of came about so many years back due to a life-changing event. So I was wondering if you could start there and talk us a little bit through how you went on your journey to where you are today.
Yeah, I mean, there was a point in my life where I thought I was, doing the right things and being healthy and really working at it, but then I realized I wasn't.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people deal with and identify with that because they're trying and they want to, but things become challenging and things become maybe too much to really get some momentum that they don't know where to go or they don't know how to get started back again. And so for me, it was actually a life-changing event for me where about almost 9 years ago, my father needed open heart surgery.
Okay.
And so that was an extreme thing for me because my father's whole life was very fit, very healthy, a runner. He's like half the size I am, so he's like a really small guy.
Yeah.
And thankfully now, almost 9 years later, he's still doing really well. He coaches cross country, basketball. He's always on the go, so he has a ton of energy.
Awesome.
But when that happened, it was just shocking to me and everybody that knows him because they're like, how could somebody that is in their 60s, quote unquote healthy, have something like that happen to them? And that was my number one question. And so my change into being serious about becoming healthy and health and wellness and fitness, it really happened overnight. It was something that I said, I need to figure this out. I need to become healthy myself now because I absolutely do not want to have that happen to me whenever I get older. I was on a path that I was working long hours. I was stressed. I was definitely not taking care of myself as well as I should be. And I knew that, open heart surgery is probably going to be the best case scenario for me if I continued on that path. So I got real serious about it and dove in head first and just started to learn about health and nutrition because from my dad, I realized that you can exercise your whole life, but if you're not eating right and fueling your body properly, you're still going to be sick on the inside. And that's actually what counts more than how much you exercise.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting. You mentioned that everyone thought your dad was doing it right, but maybe he wasn't. I also like that you made a comment about you decided sort of at that moment to make the change, right? So there's the thought of I want to make the change and I'm going to decide to make this change, and then there's actually the behavior to move through the change. And so could you talk a little bit about, now you knew you wanted to do it, talk a little bit about how you got started on that journey of making the transition to where you wanted to be.
Yeah, so like I said, it was an overnight decision for me. I knew the next day I had to do something about it. So I just went and started to learn and understand how food affects your body. And so I'm a true believer that food can be the best medicine or create the worst disease inside of you. And after everything that I've tried and learned about over the last 9 years, it was just something that I knew that I needed to make a change with that first in order to kind of set the foundation for everything else that I was doing. So it wasn't just an overnight success and all of a sudden the next day I figured it out and it was, I was there. It took about 5 or 6 years for me to actually try enough things and pull enough information from all those things to really realize how I can achieve this successfully, especially with the life that I led, because I was busy and I have children now and life is very crazy. So it's not like I have all this time to be like this professional chef and prepare all this food and and go to all these farmers markets that are miles and miles away from each
Yeah.
other. And so in order to do that, I really had to figure things out. And so I think that's where a lot of people struggle, is they don't know where to begin, and they don't have an easy way to do it to be successful. And then whenever they don't have that success right away, they tend to drop off, or it tends to not be as important any longer. And that's where you get the kind of, up and down or yo-yo effect.
Yeah, it's interesting because we spend this time thinking about a change. We decide we want to make the change, but then we don't know how to execute it, right? And so you said it took you 4 to 5 years to get there. How long have you been on this journey as of today?
So on a serious matter, about 9 years, whenever that happened to my dad. But I was actually even trying to be healthier prior to that. So 15, 20 years is me trying to be healthy. But then there was this kind of turning point in my life, or 0 point, where I was very serious about it.
Yeah.
And so, 4 or 5 years for me to do this trial and error and read and learn and talk to people and gather information and try a number of different things was a long journey for me. And I realized that people don't have the patience and time and energy to do that like I did. They might not be as committed to it as I was. I was absolutely going to find the answer. And so that's why I want to share with other people how to, what I've learned, and, how I can help them, because, it's nice to know somebody else has done it and they understand like certain things that can help other people.
Yeah, it's interesting. I talked on a recent podcast about this idea of the change curve, this idea of the faster you can move through it, the better off that you'll be. And I think initial decision to, I want to make a change, is great. Your change curve, though, indirectly lasted maybe 4 or 5 years to it becomes the norm, right? So it's this initial shock of what maybe happened to someone in your family, and then you start to say, well, I don't want that to be me, right? So we start to move through, and then we hit this valley of despair where it's, I'm doing things right, but I'm also getting stuck, because if it were perfect, a week later I would have been up here, and that just doesn't happen. I also talk a little bit about habit, right? So that's sort of part of that change curve, which is, how does it become part of the norm of my life? What do you think made you get stuck in that valley of despair, or what made it take 4 or 5 years? Like, I want people to understand that a decision to make a change and actually making the change is not overnight, right? It takes time. So could you talk a little bit about some of the obstacles that you faced as it related to, maybe if you had the same obstacles today, they wouldn't affect because it's the norm, but they did affect because you were in transition at that point.
Yeah, there's, a lot of them. And, it can be a job, it can be having children, family issues, just day-to-day life, right? So, you might become interested in something else that takes away from your time that maybe you currently spend working out or meal prepping or going to the grocery store, or, following a certain program that you really like. Maybe you're traveling more and, most of your workouts are at home and you can't take that equipment with you.
Sure.
And so any one of those things can happen to any one of us, or even just an interest level, right? I'm the type of person, I get very interested in one thing and then I switch to something else because I just want to try something new.
It's our generation, I think.
Yeah, and so all of those things come into play. It wasn't just one of those things.
Yeah.
And so as a result of that, it was an evolution of things. So my change curve initially was super fast. So I made that decision. I got over that shock. I started to figure things out.
Yep.
I obviously had that dip of like, oh, I'm actually not very healthy right now and I need to make a change. But I started to climb up that hill quickly.
Yep.
And then once I got up that hill, it was almost like sliding back down and climbing back up again. And so even for me today, 9 months ago, I was working out 5-6 days a week and following a program that was set for me at about 2,600 calories a day. I don't work out 5 or 6 days a week right now because I have life happening and I have work and businesses and family and children and things like that in play. And so that's something that gets cut out of my daily routine. And so my focus is still keeping the nutrition right, because that's really what I'm passionate about, is eating right, putting good dense nutrition in your body, and doing it in a way that is sustainable for a long period of time. And so if I'm going to cut one thing, it's not going to be that. It's going to be the other things that are in my life, whether it's going to the gym 5 to 6 times a week. Would that be nice to do? Yes. Do I do it 2 or 3 times at home now? Yes. Am I still in pretty good shape? Yes. Am I not in as good a shape as I was last year? Probably not. But, things like that come up for everybody. And so it's really a matter of what can you do for extended period of time. So remember, when this happened to my dad, I was thinking, how can I be healthy 30 years from now? Not how can I be healthy 30 days from now?
Yep.
And so 30 years from now, if you think about it, your life's going to change so much that you can't just think that, oh, I'm going to follow this one plan and eat the same meal and do the same workout routine for 30 years and it's going to be the same all the time.
Yep.
Life is going to happen. And so as that flow happens, you have to adjust and you have to have plans and you have to have support and ideas that are going to allow you to be flexible with that and still stay on track.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of great things, setting long-term goals, right? And always working towards those goals. You said something else that was really, really interesting to me is that what you're doing today that is providing the most benefit does not, and I want to say this lightly and then you can add to it, did not create at the moment a ton of sacrifice. So I think what happens is people think, if I want to change my health, I have to go to the gym. Therefore, I'm going to have to give up 2 hours a night and lose time for my family. We all eat. All of us eat.
Right.
You just change what you eat,
Right.
right? So if I wake up and I want to have French toast and you're going to have something that is max or minimized to the calories you want, we're still eating. So I didn't lose, right? I didn't really sacrifice. Maybe I think I lost some sacrifice with taste or junk food that I'm eating, but you didn't lose the time from family, right? So that's I think important as well. People always think we have to give something up to get something, and that's not what I heard you say.
Yeah, and that took me a little bit of time to realize as well, because some of the programs I was doing early on did take a lot of time and they did take a lot of energy, and it was just something that wasn't long-term sustainable for me. So even though I was eating and fueling myself with actually very, very, very good nutrition, I couldn't sustain it. And so I had to be flexible with my approach to it and say, you know what, maybe I can incorporate some of these other ideas into what this program is and allow that to create some flexibility, some time, give me back some time in what I'm doing day to day, so that if I become overwhelmed and I look at what I have to do that day to accomplish that health goal and I see that it's just too much, I don't want to give up.
Sure.
And so if I give up on it, then I'm going to start sliding back down that hill and not feel like I'm going to be able to get back up that hill again.
Yeah. And so we all at times fall off track, right? So what do you do today to make sure that you are staying aligned with what you want to accomplish personally? So if it's I want this to be my calorie intake every day and that's my goal, and it's a long-term goal, but every day I'm working on it. What do you focus on, or what do you do to make sure you're staying aligned with where you want to head?
Yeah, I mean, I was a classic be strict during the week and then do what I want on the weekend in terms of eating. So, going out, hanging out with friends, whatever it is. And so a lot of people were lower on their calories during the week, and then the weekend they spike. And hopefully they don't spike too much where they're totally blowing that whole week out of the water. A lot of times I did. Then I realized that my weekends started on Thursday, and I was actually eating poorly almost half the week. So that was eye-opening.
Only
for me.
7 days.
Yeah, right.
3 of them on bad.
So that was very eye-opening to me when I started to be realistic and serious about it for myself. So that was one thing that you do have to be serious about it and actually, take a period of time and log what you're doing. I don't think that's sustainable long-term, to log everything you eat every day forever. But if you do it for a couple of weeks to understand some of your habits and see where there's things that you can cut out, that's definitely helpful so that you can analyze it and make changes if you're going to be honest with yourself about it. The other thing is I always struggled to get back on track the next week. And so 2 or 3 days became 2 or 3 weeks of not eating right or having some of the bad habits. And so today, the plan that I have actually has some stuff built into it that allows me, when Monday, Tuesday comes around, I actually have built into my plan a way in which I can basically stop what was going on and get back on track very easily, and in a way that resets me for the whole week. And then allows me to have, a good rest of the week, and then however long I want to continue after that.
Yeah, I like the idea of tracking what you're doing or taking notes, right? I look at that as communicating with yourself, right? So I talked about that when I talked about the change curve. One way is communication. People think, well, if if I'm not talking to anybody directly, how do I do that? There's a way just to communicate with yourself, to reiterate what you're going after. You also talked about early on you needed to learn about everything, so there was sort of this education and training. And correct me if I'm wrong, I think I saw at one point you had a Facebook post about a 6 a.m. or 6:30 a.m. meeting with a support group that you guys kind of work with, right? So
Yeah.
could you talk a little bit about the support? I know your wife is also involved in this pretty well, so there's a support mechanism there. Could you talk a little bit about how that's benefited you, again, strategically for where you and or your wife went ahead?
Yeah, accountability. That's like the unsung hero in what we do. So when I started the program and routine that I'm on now, my wife actually hadn't started it yet.
Okay.
She was pregnant with our second daughter at the time, so she just wasn't in the mindset to do anything different. And so I did okay for about a year and a half, but then when my wife started, I recommitted. And when I recommitted, my results went through the roof because I was doing it to help her, and I wanted it more for her. I wanted her results to happen more so than I wanted it. I wasn't even focused on myself. I was like, I'm just going to do this with her so that I can show her how to do it. And in the meantime, it actually allowed me to do much better myself.
Okay.
And so, having an accountability partner and accountability group is really important. And it's actually something that we stress quite a bit is don't do this on your own. I'll be your accountability partner. We do that for a lot of people, but my journey is so much further ahead that sometimes you might not be able to relate with where I'm at right now, and you don't realize what I went through in my early stages of what it was. But me and my wife having each other there to support each other and push each other. We're actually very competitive with each other.
Yeah,
So,
that's good.
so between the two of us, we really, really push each other. And it's nice to have that. So, finding people to do what you're doing with makes a huge difference.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think again, you've landed on many key points that I stress to people when I talk about change, which is educate yourself, make sure you're communicating about and understanding the change you want, and support by far is one of the most important things, right? I'm not saying you can't go at it alone, but the success rate of going at it alone is much lower than having even one person, or 20 people, or 50,000 people, right? Depending on how big your network can be. I do the same thing. I talked about it as it relates to, the way I just choose to network, even if I'm not looking for a job, even if I'm not looking for anything from people. I just like to do that as part of sort of staying in tune to if I ever have to make a change, like professionally, right? So I think it's very valuable. Can you talk a little bit about today? Really, what is sort of your ultimate goal from the perspective of what you're doing today, not only for yourself but the people that you're also helping?
Yeah. Well, one point that you just brought up
Sure.
that reminded me of something is I probably could have used support when I first started 9 years ago, and maybe that's why I went through 4 or 5 years of doing well and then sliding back and then getting back on track and then sliding back. So I think even for me, I see it now. I didn't see it at the time because I wanted to be like, I can do this all on my own. I'm just going to focus on it and push through it. When in reality, it would have been nice to have somebody there side by side that would have been running with me and doing something and helping each other out. So in helping my wife, it actually paired perfectly with what I started to become passionate about after my dad got sick, was health and being healthy, and opened my eyes to, I can help other people. And so for us, my whole perspective on things changed, and my wife's as well. At the time, whenever I started, we were 9 months grieving the loss of our first daughter. Okay. And so when that happened, you talk about a change and how you have to just completely just rearrange your whole life in terms of like how you feel and how you think about and how you approach something. Everything was different. And so I didn't know where I was. I didn't know, nothing had the same meaning anymore. So work, friends, family, just everything in my life was completely, I had to pick it all up and put it back together again. And so when I did that, I realized that some of these things weren't serving me the way that I wanted them to. And I didn't know what it was. And that was a change curve for me that took about 2 years to realize that I needed to do something else, but what I needed to do was something that was helping other people on a very personal and a very long-lasting level. And so when I saw the effect that it had on my wife, like literally 5 days in, she you could see her like light up
Yeah.
and wake up and get off the couch and feel like she needed to move.
Yep.
Which she hadn't felt like that a year after we had our second daughter, who's very healthy and doing really well now. But that gave me the passion to say, you know what, I really enjoy health. Now I have a way that I can help people. And so that change happened over a couple of years, where it took me time to start to realize that that's where I wanted to take my passion. That's where I really have an interest in doing something that's going to create a long-lasting impression on individual people. But also for my daughter, I can show her that, you know,
Sure.
this is how you should live. You should live healthy. You should help other people. You should be there to support other people and, you know, help them be better.
Yeah, positive change is contagious, right? I mean, it's awesome to see if you're in the company of others, right? So you see people, you know, I've been talking about starting a business for years, right? And I've been talking about, you know, the podcast idea was long before I met you, right? So I think it's that maybe even if it's not direct support group, just knowing that there are other people out there working towards the same goals, but having that group of people, again, whether it be 5 or 50 that
Right.
you can reach out to, is very important. How can we learn a little bit more about what you're doing today?
So I think you'll share all my contact
Absolutely.
info, but on all social media channels, I'm pfisher26.
Okay.
That's definitely the easiest way to check out what I have going on. If you have questions about what I'm doing, definitely feel free to reach out, connect, send me a message. I'm happy to help answer questions to anyone.
Yeah, and if you connect with Paul, he always has a ton of good stuff to say every day, at least 3 or 4 things. I can't keep up, but I actually sent one of your articles to my wife today, though.
Did
It was
you really?
good. Yeah, it was really good.
Nice.
If you could, you know, I don't want to keep you here all day, and I know you have limited time, but if you could offer like one piece of advice, really as it relates to, you know, your area of expertise, which is, I think more than anything, well, I think there's 2 things people really want to change. A lot of people that I meet want to change their jobs, and the other big thing, which rates higher for me, is health. So if you could offer one piece of advice for how people can get started as it relates to changing their health, what would that be?
So I think probably 2 things. One is,
I'll take 2.
I always like to give a little more than I'm asked for. But, you know, number 1 is whatever you're going to try, do it. Don't feel like, oh, I've tried everything in the past, and have this attitude of, oh, this isn't going to work for me.
Yep.
So don't be discouraged that you've tried other things, worked with other programs, other people, or whatever. Try the next thing. I didn't expect what I'm doing now to be the last thing that I ever did,
Yep.
but I found it. And so the next thing you do might be the last program, the last lifestyle, last diet, whatever you want to call it. I don't care for that term much, but you call it whatever you want. It might be the last one that you do, but you have to try it. And if you don't, you're doing yourself a disservice, because that could totally change your life around. And if you improve your health, I really think that can be the foundation to change everything else in your life. So how you feel about your job, how you feel about and handle your relationships in your life, your friends, the things that you enjoy doing most. You might want to be outside and do outside activities a lot more, but maybe you don't have the energy or the stamina to do it. If you start to get healthier, have more energy, maybe even just lose 5 pounds, you're going to feel like doing that a lot more. So definitely, don't be discouraged by the past, and definitely say yes and move forward for the future. The other thing is, whatever you're going to do, think about it and what you can do long term.
Yep.
So my whole approach is, what can I do 30 years from now? That's my mindset on everything. So don't necessarily do something that's only 30 days. Maybe you will do like a 30-day program, but what are you going to do after 30 days? So it's not that you don't do the 30-day program, but are you going to be able to continue it? Are you going to have like a step-down approach to, kind of get yourself back into like a normal or maintenance mode? Or are you going to just totally stop and go back to all your old habits and then crash again?
Yep.
And so have a plan or a program that allows for long-term maintenance as opposed to just a quick fix.
Yeah, so I think some key things there, right? So we should set long-term goals, understand that resilience is important, right? So make sure you always get back up on your feet every time you might feel that you're failing. And overall, I think a continuous message that might be a new podcast after this is how it's contagious, right? This idea that a positive change in your life can lead to other positive changes. It gets sort of that snowball effect, right? So start with one thing, and see where it leads. Otherwise, I want to thank you for your time today. We will definitely leave all of Paul's information within the description of the podcast as well as the video. I want to thank you for stopping by today. It's been very enlightening to me. I know I've been waiting for a while to tell this story, so it's been great to actually be able to tell the story. We hope. So, otherwise, thanks for stopping by. I appreciate it.
All right, man.
All right.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody,
Great.
for tuning in.